Well, hello and welcome to Life Beyond PhD Seminar Series, and we're going to talk about how to build your own personal brand. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Gertrude Nonterah. She graduated from Lewis Katz Temple School of Medicine with a PhD in microbiology and immunology. And interestingly, I also went to Temple School of Medicine for my PhD in cardiovascular biology. And in fact, we overlapped. We were at Temple right around the same time. And just as I said, by being introvert in nature, I never got to meet people. I was mostly working in the lab, trying to do the great science, but I'm looking back now, I wish I had interacted more, and then I would know Gertrude way before this thing. She's currently a science writer at CG Life Science, which is an integrated life science and health marketing agency. She is also an adjunct professor in biology at Cuyamaca College. She's passionate about helping undergrads and graduates leverage free social media tools, how to find their dream jobs. And we're going to hear a lot and learn a lot about that today. And I also want to tell you guys, she does run a podcast called Create and Prosper Podcast. She has very helpful tips, which everyone can use, especially early career scientists who are planning to transition into whether non-academic or academic careers. She has her own YouTube channel. She also has some digital projects, very, very useful digital products which help you with understanding freelance writing and endless clients. So with that, it's our pleasure to have Dr. Gertrude Nonterah here.
Wow, thanks, Harinda. Thank you so much for introducing me with such a glowing, starting out on such a glowing note. Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Gertrude Nonterah, G. You can call me G. And I'm so excited to do this presentation because I wish this was a presentation I had when I was in grad school. And because Harinda and I both went to Temple, and we definitely never saw any of this. We were just told, do your research, publish your papers, get a good postdoc, and then, you can hope to get an academic job someday. But here's the problem with that particular plan. And I'm going to share my presentation that I have today. Don't worry, it's not going to be a boring PowerPoint. I'm going to be telling you a story. And it's a story about myself, So here's the thing. I did not want to stay in academic research. There was this, when I started my PhD, the idea was that maybe I'd like it. Maybe I'd like to teach someday. But then 2 years or 3 years into it, I realized, well, I do want to finish my PhD, but I definitely don't want to become a PI. I don't want to remain in academic research. And so what else can I do with my PhD? So really, I began to research. I began to look for resources that would help me move beyond or outside of academia. But like any good thing in life, there were roadblocks, right? There were roadblocks to what, as I began to research, I began to realize that, it's not as easy. First of all, it's not easy. Secondly, most people in academia don't necessarily support the idea of finding work or finding your life's work outside of academia, especially when you spent 5, 6, 7 years doing extensive research. So, and then there was also the roadblock of me being an international student. So I don't know if I can, okay, maybe I can put this. Yeah. So everything I was learning so far was grooming me to be a researcher, and I knew nothing else, right? Number two, I was an international student. And if you're an international student in the United States, it is very welcoming, but your options as far as work are very, very limited. And then, of course, there's no such thing as a career day in graduate school, so you don't even learn of all the other paths outside of being an academic researcher that there is. So I took matters into my own hands and began to do my own work. And what did I do? I researched. We're really, really good at that. You're in this PhD program because you're good at researching. You're really good at going on Google Scholar or going on PubMed or going on some other tool out there to research. One of the blogs I found at the time was The Cheeky Scientist. And at the time, and this was, I want to say, between 2014 and 2015, he was the only person that I could find that was writing extensively on the fact that there was a path for individuals with PhDs who were interested in life beyond academia. All right. So I began to study a lot from the cheeky scientists. Now I have also started my own YouTube channel because I want to be able to show people that there are other paths. And so I started my own YouTube channel just a few months ago on how to do this. So if I put this there just for those of you that may be looking for resources. Another thing I began to do was I began to network on LinkedIn, and I'll focus most of my talk here today. And I also, the third thing I did was began to look for and research pathways that would allow me to have unrestricted work access to the US market, because as an international student, this was going to be really difficult for me to do unless something about my status as far as being an international student was concerned. Thankfully, I was able to research and find what's known as the EB2 visa, which is a type of visa for international students that ultimately makes you a permanent resident in the United States and removes those barriers to the US work market that exists for international students. I'm not going to focus on that third part. If you want to ask me personal questions about it, you can definitely ask me afterwards. But I am going to focus on that middle one, which is beginning to network on LinkedIn. What does LinkedIn have to do with anything? So for most people, LinkedIn is that stuffy old platform, and I actually have LinkedIn open. But for most people, LinkedIn is that stuffy old platform that for most people, you would only go and post your resume, right? But I hope you guys can see my screen. Yeah, thanks. But it really isn't. LinkedIn is way more than that. And LinkedIn is the reason why I currently work at CG Life. Now, CG Life is an integrated life science and health marketing agency. What we do is we create content, create social media content, create marketing content, work on public relations for the biggest and the brightest of life science and healthcare companies. And so, and really, this is where I shine. I love it. I absolutely love it every day. But it didn't start there. That's not where it started. It actually started when I finished with my PhD. I did end up going to do a short stint as a postdoc at UCSD. And I think the postdoc continued to cement the idea in my fact that I really did not want to be in research. But it was good experience. And what it helped me to do was actually start a freelance writing business. So I started freelance writing, which is you just write content for businesses. And I worked with I worked with a health technology company. I worked with a home health care, because my background is in the sciences. And I also have a bachelor's degree in nursing. So I leveraged that and I began to write all types of content for these businesses in order for them to promote their businesses, because I understood the science. I'd done this for about 4 years. 3 years into my postdoc, funding ran out, I was laid off, and thankfully I had the freelance business to hold me over, and I was able to run that full time. But that freelance business also allowed me to land this job I have at CG Life, because I had been writing for 4 years. Now, why did I just tell you that whole story? The reason I told you that whole story is because it was here on LinkedIn that I noticed that somebody, my current boss, had posted a position for a writer within CG Life, and we were connected. I applied for the position. We spoke. She really liked, even though she didn't know me in person, once she spoke with me, she really liked what I was doing online, as well as how, my presentation to her during the interview. And ultimately, I was able to land that position. So how can you leverage a platform like LinkedIn to land your dream job? And really, when I say dream job, I really do mean writing. Being a science writer is my dream job. And I'm so glad I'm able to get up and do that every single day. And that sounds very non-scientific for our very scientific minds, but I hope you can also, maybe sit down and think, what would my dream job be? A few things LinkedIn allows you to do is it allows you to connect with professionals who are already in the fields that you like to get into. So whether that is consulting, whether that is becoming a medical science liaison, and I'm talking mostly about jobs outside of academia, but it's also a great place to connect in academia as well, by the way. So we're not bashing academia here at all. For me, for me, it just wasn't the right thing, but maybe it is for you. You can still do that here. But what it allows you to do is actually allows you to showcase your work and your personality. One thing I found was that when you're applying for jobs, as unique and amazing as your research is, when there's a position posted online, there are hundreds of applicants that apply for that one position, and only one person is going to get picked. All of you have PhDs, all of you have publications, all of you have the same thing. Everybody has the same qualifications, right? So what makes you stand out? And for me, LinkedIn was the place that allowed me to stand out, because very consistently, like Harinda had shared, I would share my work. I would share thoughts on the news. I would share thoughts on scientific news. This year especially has been great for a lot of us as scientists because it's COVID-19 and there's all this misinformation, and then there's the vaccines. So it really is a great opportunity for us to actually join in the conversation that's going on online and say, hey, this is my expertise, and here are my thoughts on A, B, C, and D. So I had done this very, very consistently, and that helped me to land the job I currently have. So there are a few things right now. If as I'm speaking, you don't have a LinkedIn profile, please go and start one right now. As we're speaking, a lot of you are not on camera. Just go to linkedin.com and register for an account. If you have registered for an account but never really use it, okay, great. Go find the password and sign in. And here are a few things that I want you to do, because it's not just posting on LinkedIn. Having a very well optimized profile is absolutely important as well. And I'll show you why that's important. So here I am, here's my face. I have a little banner, nothing crazy, right? So just a picture and a background. And then I state what I do. Before I landed this role as a science writer, I used to put freelance health writer because that's what I was. I produce content for health companies on a freelance basis. And so I have that. Now, you want to put that in your title. Currently, if you're a graduate student, that's okay. You can put graduate student, but I don't just want you to put graduate student. I want you to say something like, also looking for opportunities in, right? So if you're looking for opportunities in whatever, in medical affairs or in educational affairs, like Harinda is, at UC Irvine. If you're looking for that, state that, right? The reason why you want to state that is because of this little search bar right here. LinkedIn has done an excellent job of optimizing their algorithm for search. And so I'll show you where, let me see if I can find this. Okay. Where it says search appearances. So if you fully fill out your profile, you'll have access to this dashboard on your own, or for your other people will not see it, but you will see it. So here's mine. I've appeared in 100 searches I think this week. It's a weekly thing, okay? Okay, so yeah, weekly search stats. I've appeared in 100 searches. Let's look at the people that were looking for people like me. Temple University, University of Leicester, University of UC Davis, Aerotech, Nucleus Global, a pharmaceutical company. So at least 4 out of 5 of these are like related to what I do. What were they looking for me for? Adjunct professor, content writer, lab assistant. I'm not a lab assistant, but I showed up for that. Founder, I'm not a founder. But these first two are relevant because in my profile, if we go back into my profile, okay, I have science writer and I have adjunct professor because I do adjunct teach at Cuyamaca College, which is a community college system here in San Diego, right? And so if these individuals were recruiting, they would come over here, check my profile. And actually I've had a few inquiries this week, and usually I have to say, no, thank you. I already have a job. So imagine that people are now coming to you versus you having to always search for a job. right? That would be wonderful if people were coming to you first and say, hey, I see you have such a great profile, and everything you have really is aligned with what we would like to hire for. What do you think about interviewing? And I've had many of these inquiries in the past year, right? And so you want to make sure, and how you do this is, there's a pen on your profile always. And so you go ahead, put your name, credentials. If you already have it or currently have it, or you could put PhD, C, whichever one you want. Your headline, this is important. Obviously, there are people who are actively looking for people like you to employ, right? So put that in there. My current position, my education, and then a few other pieces of information about me. So make sure to fill all of that out. Then I also, in here in your about section, I'm not a very stiff person. I don't, I know academia is very like bow tie, but I'm not a bow tie person at all. So I just say I've been writing since 2014, and then I state like in my current role what I do, how I started out. Right. And all of this is really intentional. I have content specialist, I have freelance writer, I have science education, I have community college. All of this is very intentional because, again, when individuals are searching for you in LinkedIn search, the better your profile is optimized, the better you can show up and be a more preferred candidate. Okay. Then if we scroll down a little bit, it's just the activity. But then scrolling down more, you will be able to get, you'll be able to find where your experience is. So put in any work experience that you have, make sure to fill it all out. Don't, I find that sometimes people get a little, I don't want to say lazy, but reluctant to fill this out, but please do, because again, it gives people a lot of context when they come to your profile and they read this and they want to decide if you are the person they want to hire or want to reach out for an interview. My education, and then that's it. You also have these skills and endorsements. I don't really bother about that. What I really think about a lot is my experience, my work and educational experience, my about section, and also this top section here, really highlighting my skills and highlighting my strengths and allowing that to speak for me, so that by the time somebody comes to speak with me, they're already impressed. They're already happy with what they see. And it's just a matter of me convincing them through that interview that I'm the person they want to go with. Okay, so if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, please do that. Now, another thing you want to do here on LinkedIn is send connection requests. So if you go into my network, right, which I see a few people, I got one already from UC Irvine. Yay, okay. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't want to butcher your name. So yeah, Chen. So thank you for sending me this. But anyway, so this is really good. Now, the reason why you want to send connection requests is because you want to start connecting with people in the positions you would like to fill. So let's say that you want to go into medical affairs. Let's just choose that, right? I would go into the LinkedIn search bar and type in medical affairs here in the search bar and go to people, medical affairs in people, because you can search for this in many ways. So medical affairs in people, right? And then you will see a number of people that usually LinkedIn is good at doing this so that it's the people are more are in your location, are close to you proximity wise. Okay, so over here I have a list of individuals who work in medical affairs, and so I could click on here where it says connect, and once I click connect, you will have the opportunity to send a message to the individual and say anything really. But really what I like to advise grad students to do is reach out to when you connect, just send a really short message and say, hello, my name is so and so. I'm really interested in exploring a career in medical affairs. And I see that you work in medical affairs. And so I thought you would be good to connect. Don't, at that point, you don't want to ask them for a Zoom meeting or anything like that. So connect with them. Once you connect with them, also see how active they are on LinkedIn. Sometimes people are not super active on LinkedIn, and it may, you may reach out to them and they don't respond and you may feel a little dejected. Don't worry about that. So what I would do would be click through, let's see, this person is the head of medical affairs at ID by DNA. So let me click through. All right. And then let me scroll down and see their activity. So I can go to see all activity and I can see when they last interacted here on LinkedIn. That was 2 days ago. Okay, so 2 days ago, this individual made a post around SARS-CoV-2. Let's see, they have also commented on somebody else's post. LinkedIn is really good about that, about telling you that information. So I see that this person is quite active. They've been on here at least 2 times in the last 2 or 3 times in the last 1 week, right? That's good enough for me to say, because obviously somebody who's the head of medical affairs is going to be super busy. They cannot be here all day. So they've been on here about 3 times in the past week. That's somebody that's active enough that I would say I would like to connect with if I was interested in medical affairs. And then once I connect with them, it would be maybe a day or two of interacting to see how they're like. And then you can then message them and thank them for connecting with you and ask them, you can ask them questions. There are a few ways this can go. So I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, can I have a Zoom call with you? I'll buy you coffee. And, I've had the Zoom call with them, and they've sent me like $10 for coffee. I don't drink coffee, but it was nice. Right. And so we connected and we spoke for about an hour, and it was a really great conversation. I have another one coming up somewhere in middle of April. Actually, I've spoken to multiple people at this point who have connected with me wanting to learn about science writing. And I've been happy to take half an hour to speak with them. So there are people out there who are happy to speak with you about their professions. Not everybody will, but there are people like me out there that will be more than happy to do that. And so connect with them and don't be afraid to just be very respectful and either request to speak with them via Zoom, or you could ask them if they would not mind if you just sent them like a 3 or 4 question list and what answers they would give to that. So you could also send them like a list of, if you don't like Zoom, you don't like to talk to people, that's okay. You don't have to talk to anybody, but eventually you have to talk to someone. But you can send them questions and then they can answer, you can learn more. And then you'll find out that some of these individuals are also very active in, there's some groups here on LinkedIn. LinkedIn groups is not as active as something like Facebook groups, but there are groups. And so, for instance, Parag, who I'm connected with here on LinkedIn, has a career networking group, and it's quite active. So I'm usually in there just seeing what people are up to. And it's a great way to connect with other people in other fields and learn about them and learn about their professions and ultimately get your foot in the door. Because whether you believe it or not, most positions, there's an article from 2011 in NPR, and I don't think it has changed much. And that article says that about 70% of positions in the United States are filled with people that know other people. So with the network of people that a person has. So when there's a position, sometimes it never even actually gets online to be posted. The ones that get online to be posted are the ones that maybe nobody has a network for yet, right? Most positions will be filled before they're ever posted online. So if you know people, if you're building, you've built this rapport with somebody, you don't have to be best friends with them. It could be that you've just chatted with them over Zoom. It could be that you once a week will interact with a post that they have or join into the conversation, and you make yourself known. And this is what personal branding is all about. It sounds very, very, modern and very Gen Z, but Personal branding simply is making yourself known so that every time somebody thinks about someone that will be excellent for a particular role or for a particular opportunity, you are the person that comes to mind. That's all personal branding is, right? So by doing a few of these things, setting up your profile the right way, beginning to interact with individuals that are in the profession you like to get into. I did that for a really long time. And essentially doing these informational interviews will allow you to collect a lot of information that will really position you excellently for that position that you're looking for. Okay. So going back to this right here, and I'll definitely take your questions in a minute. All right. So this is how I began to really network on LinkedIn, and it has paid off. How did Harinder find me? How did he find me? Harinder found me on LinkedIn, and that's why I'm speaking to you today. Right? He found me, we began interacting. We found out we both went to Temple. We're like, what? We went to Temple around the same time. And then, he had me come and be a judge on the competition that was held, I think, the end of last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so your biggest asset to landing a job, or to even just landing like great opportunities, like speaking to 25 students at UC Irvine, is LinkedIn, right? We didn't know each other at Temple, but just through a social media platform, I get to speak to you today. So that's how powerful this is. So what are the steps? Start building your profile now. Do not leave it dormant. Engage in happening conversations. It doesn't have to be every day. It could be once a week. It could be twice a week. There are a lot of PhDs right now who are talking a lot about their work, because I think a lot of individuals maybe in this generation realize that academia is not always for everybody, and that there are ways, and people who have explored those other ways now talk about it more, definitely more than they were talking about it 10 years ago when I started grad school. Okay, definitely more in 2021. So you should also talk about your own work, right? What are you doing? Of course, you don't want to give up any proprietary information or any research information that is precious, because I know that that's PIs take that very seriously, so that nobody steals their ideas. But talk about work that is published, your ideas, what's going on in the news and stuff like that. Demonstrate your hidden skills. There's so many hidden skills that we have as PhDs. It's incredible. As a PhD, you most likely can a great communicator. You are probably really good at creating PowerPoints. You may not think that that's a skill, but it's such an essential skill. Not everybody knows how to create a PowerPoint. You are great at researching and finding peer-reviewed material to back up a case. That's really valuable. You're really good at creating stories out of nothing. Who am I speaking to? Just give me a thumbs up. You take an idea and you create something out of it, right? That's what we're really good at. So if you're good at that, then you need to display that. You need to communicate that. And then, like I shared with you, talk with people in the fields you'd like to venture into by conducting informational interviews. Again, not everybody will say yes to you, but even if you get one person to say yes to you, you're going to learn so much more than if you never spoke to anybody. And you would have built a great connection that could be leveraged sometime in the future. So that's the long and short of what I wanted to talk to you today. I wanted this to be really conversational. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Gertrude. Gertrude, I'm sorry. I always tend to butcher names.
I know.
So no, this is a wonderful presentation, and I'm glad you touched upon many important things. And the most importantly, how we connected, and what I was doing in the morning. I get up, and with my coffee, the amount of time it takes me to finish my coffee, that's the amount of time I've spent on LinkedIn every morning. It's like, reading news. It's like be on LinkedIn, right? I'm not looking for a job right now, but even then I have to be active. I can't start being active on LinkedIn only when I'm looking for jobs, because as Gertrude said, that you people want to see how active you have been, right? So I think that was, I looked on LinkedIn, I saw someone, who's from Temple, and she's so active in the space, and that's how we connected, and we are back in touch again. So that was wonderful. And the forum is open to questions by the audience now. Feel free to write. There is a question. It is a great thank you by Hedy. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So she mentioned about something about informational interview. That's amazing. Would you like to add a little bit on informational interview, Gertrude?
Yeah, I would say that, for informational interviews, always have a list of questions. It's helpful if you have a list of questions that you want to ask the individual. So, I'll give you a few examples. So hopefully that will spark your imagination. So you can ask them a question like, what does a typical day look like for you? How did you get into the role you're in right now? For a long time, I wanted to do something like Harinda is doing. Right? I really wanted to do that. But it wasn't an easy field to break into because, again, I didn't know anybody. So even if I applied, people would look at the resume and it's like, yeah, you're great, but I know this person, right? And it seems really unfair that this happens, but this is the reality of the job market. Yeah. So I would have a list of questions. One of them I've asked is, how did you get into this role? Because the way that somebody got into a role is really helpful. And you can begin to do some of those things so that you can get on that path. So for instance, if I know when I was at UCSD, the individuals that really wanted to go into teaching at colleges, not necessarily be research professors, we're in a program by the NIH. I forget what the name is, but there's an NIH program that UCSD had, and you could run that, and you could be a part of that and teach undergraduates for 2 years. And so this was really valuable experience for them because before I got my job teaching at Kuyamaka College, when I went to the interview, the question that I was asked was, have you ever taught before? And I was like, no, ma'am. But I want to teach, right? And thankfully, the head of department did give me the position. But in most cases, if you don't have teaching experience, it may be hard to teach undergraduates, even at the community college level. So finding out what somebody did to get into their role is really crucial. Asking people also about a typical day is important. So for instance, if you want to become a field application scientist, for those of you in the biomedical sciences, or you want to become a medical science liaison, you will find that these people travel a lot. They have to travel a lot, even in the pandemic. Well, not as much as the pandemic, but I know that for application scientists and for medical science liaisons, they're on the road maybe 5 days a week. So when you find out that piece of information from them, and you decide that you don't want to travel 5 days a week, then you don't go on that path because you may be rudely awakened by the fact that you have to travel 5 days out of 7. Right. I also like to ask, what's difficult about this job, or what do you enjoy about this job? If somebody absolutely hates their job, that's not the person to speak to. You want to kind of speak to the person that, well, it's still information gathering because you get to hear what they do not like about the job or the position. And then I would also ask them about, we went through the challenges. I'd also ask them about what the opportunity for growth is, right? So that's also a good question. So for instance, if you're in a science writer role, what's the opportunity for growth? Where do you go from being a science writer? Are you going to just be a science writer your whole life? Well, no. You could be a science writer for a really long time if that's what you really want, but you could also move into medical communications, and you could be part of, PR teams at large healthcare systems. And you don't necessarily have to write, but you do have to distill information so that it's communicated accurately to the media and to regular people. Who are not in the sciences, just people outside of the sciences, right? So there is opportunity for growth. So I could, from a science writer role, I could move into a medical communications role with just about any type of company that has a medical communications role, and rise to being the the C level of in PR or marketing in this role. So you also have to explore what that looks like for you. Just like in academia, you start out as an assistant professor, associate professor, and then full professor. There are trajectories for growth in every profession, and it's good to ask the individual that's in that profession, what are some of the opportunities for growth? So those are a few questions that you can prepare for your informational interviews. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are smart, so you probably have even more questions in that regard.
Awesome. So Wing has a question. Can you talk more about EB2 visa? I'm also an international student. That's a very good question.
It's a great question. So the EB2 visa is what's known, for those of you in the crowd that are international students, it's what's called a national interest waiver visa. And then with a national interest waiver, you're essentially telling the US government that your research is in the national interest. And so you would have to prove that. And the way you prove that is through your publications, through the impact of the journals that you have published in, and really how that work contributes to the US economy as a whole. Because ultimately, with immigration and with this particular category, they want to be able to allow, I don't want to use the word, but I did the phrase, but they want to allow the brightest and the best to stay, right? So it's not put in those terms, but that's what it is. And so if you're able to show that your work does do that, then there is approval for you to go ahead and apply to be a permanent resident. So the way that that worked for me, my PhD dissertation was in gastrointestinal disease. And specifically, we were looking at toll-like receptor 2 in the epithelium and how that could repair, how we could stimulate that to repair colitis, essentially. So if we induce colitis and then we gave the animal a TLR2 ligand, what was the result? And we did see that, thankfully, I'm really grateful that my research did end up getting funded by Janssen, which is an arm of Johnson and Johnson. And so I was able to put all of that in my application and say Johnson and Johnson actually sponsored a part of my research because there was some therapeutic value to this, and that gastrointestinal disease affects this many individuals in the United States and cost, this is the healthcare burden for that. So you really had to prove, I really had to show that. And then I had to get letters of recommendation from individuals who work in my field, who work in gastroenteritis research, or work in the bacterial protein we're using as a TLR2 ligand. I had to work with people in the field to help me write recommendation letters to the government. And then there's a whole bunch of other paperwork. It's a bit extensive than I can explain in 5 minutes, but essentially you have to prove to the government that your work is in the national interest. And if you can successfully prove that, then you will be granted that. Yes, you don't have time right now. So that's why I really honed in on LinkedIn. If that's the only thing you do and you only do it once a week, and like Heidi said, she's been doing informational interviews with people, and that's helpful for her, right, Heidi? So you want to start doing that. You don't have to start on a massive level. I'm very multi-passionate, so most of the time even my husband can't keep up with me. So so you'll see me doing so many things, and then you don't want to do that, right? So what you really want to do is just focus. I would say focus on Twitter. Is also another good platform, by the way, where there are a lot of scientists that communicate. The only thing is I don't use Twitter that much, so that's why I didn't talk about it. But whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn, you really want to begin to, at least once or twice a week, engage in communications with other people. And it could be 10 minutes of your time. You could really set a timer for that and just do it for 10 minutes, because ultimately your job search process is a whole other job. believe it or not, searching for a job is a job. It's very extensive. It takes a lot of time. So starting it right now is only going to work in your favor. Don't just, like Herinda said in the beginning, scientists are thought that, or we're taught that, your research and your words will speak for you. From personal experience, unless you're going to stay in the ivory tower, this is not true. This is not true. If you're not going to stay in academic research, everything else you have to prove why you have to be there, and most of the time, half of that proving is done by you having the right connections. And so I would say just focus on LinkedIn right now. Set a timer for 10 minutes, 2 times a week, and just do that. Now, one thing I forgot to talk about was career paths for STEM students, because sometimes we forget that there are other paths outside of academia. And I mentioned a few. I'm a science writer. There is, you can definitely go into medical affairs, and medical affairs professionals tend to be individuals that are involved in the regulatory process when it comes to pharmaceutical companies. So pharmaceutical companies have to meet regulations set by the government in order for their drugs, in order for diagnostics and such to be approved and used by the government, and so by the masses, and the government, the FDA specifically, has to approve that. And so the medical affairs individuals, or in medical affairs, I want to say managers, people, okay, medical affairs people tend to work in that intersection of regulatory and making sure that the company is complying with what the government needs. Then you have something like medical science liaisons. These are also, they also work in an intersection between pharmaceutical companies or medical device companies and researchers. And so they interact, and this is where communication becomes important, but they interact with key opinion leaders within a particular research field. So let's say the pharmaceutical company is producing a drug that helps with colitis or helps with gastrointestinal disease. The medical science liaison's job is to find key people in that field and get them to sign on to be a part of their clinical trials. You could also work directly in clinical trials, managing clinical trials, doing a lot of project management. Field application scientist is another one. I'm just rattling them off because I know our time is limited. But as a field application scientist, like I was saying earlier, you travel a lot. But one of the things that you do is you provide support to people using instruments or software that are produced by biotech companies. Or you could work as a scientist in a biotech or biopharma or whatever your field is. But there are opportunities out there, and the way I found out about them is by researching and by talking to people. That's the only way you're going to get your foot in the door, because ultimately they are competitive roles because they do pay way better than academia. And everybody wants them. So you have to have a competitive edge.
So Jazz has a question. Jazz, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, yes. Thanks for your talk. My question, well, rather, do you have any comments about building your brand on LinkedIn when you have like your PI or your advisor on there? I think, in an ideal world, you can post, your brand can be anything you want it to be, but when you're like in the lab with your advisor, it's kind of difficult to be completely authentic with your own brand kind of thing.
I totally get you, and I totally understand you. And I feel like I was in that position as a grad student. The way I kind of got around it because, like, I agree, in an ideal situation you should be able to be authentic, was I would make sure that whatever I was posting had nothing to do with my lab, but it would speak about my work in general terms, or I would speak about my ability in general terms. It would not be speaking, I would not, for instance, one thing I don't do at all is go on LinkedIn and complain about my bosses. I don't do that, right?
No, of course not. It's just like for like just a really basic example, a
Right.
lot of PIs or advisors, they're not really excited if you're not interested in academia. Like that's one basic example, but if you put in your headline, interested in being medical liaison, something like as basic as that.
Mm. Well, then I think that that's a matter of um, it's such a nuanced question.
I understand. It's a complex question. Depends on the person, depends on the relationship. I just want whatever comments would help any of us who might not want to
Right.
ask the
So,
question or thinking about it.
right. If you really don't want to let them know that this is what you're looking at, I would say then leave out the looking for opportunities and so out of your headline. Just put graduate student. But they also cannot just whoever the PI is not also monitored. To be honest, they have their own lives. They're not monitoring your every activity online, right? So they don't know that you've had an informational interview with me, for instance, right? They don't know that you have reached, you're connecting with these individuals and you're building relationships with them and you're chatting with them. They don't, most of the time, it's not, and it's not a, this is not an attack on anybody, but they don't have time really. So when I was in graduate school, I wasn't as active as I was right now on LinkedIn, but I was active. And yes, I did notice that my PI checked out my profile and, people that knew her checked out my profile. But then I began to realize actually they don't care that much. They also are moving on with their own lives and trying to get their own grants and trying to, do their own thing. So ultimately, this is your own life too. So what you do outside of the four walls of the lab, as long as I'm being productive, as long as I'm helping my PI, because ultimately as grad students, we're also helping our PIs publish papers, right? So as long as you're doing what is expected of you in a lab and building up your skills in the lab, what you do online technically should not matter, but I know that sometimes it does. But ultimately, you don't, you can also measure and monitor what you want to put, because one day you're going to graduate and you're going to leave, and then it doesn't matter anymore. You everywhere you go. So do your own work, do your own groundwork in the background and build those relationships. One of the things that I did have when I was a postdoc though was I had very open discussions with my PI about the fact that I did not want to be in academia. At first, I thought I wanted to. I thought I'd give it a shot after my PhD, and I entered my postdoc and realized, no, I really don't want to be here. So we still had that conversation, and I was still able to continue on for a year or two to do research, and then funding ended anyway, so I had to leave. But I'd say gauge what the temperature is with your PI, and then also, especially right now, since you do want to finish your PhD, continue to do the work that you have to do, and and do your thing, because they can't monitor everything. But if you feel putting something out there will raise their antennas, then don't. And if you feel you have an open enough relationship with your PI that you can tell them, something, I've been exploring careers outside of academia, and you may be shocked that it may be an enlightening discussion. So there's um, and so starting that process now is just going to be valuable to you. And I learned it the hard way. Don't be like me. So those are the major challenges. Everything else has been good. But those two things, the internal battle and then losing your job and not having one because you didn't prepare for it, those can be tough.
Well, that's great, G. Thank you very much for taking time out. And this was very informational, and we really enjoyed the discussion, all the insights you offered. I did added link URL to G's LinkedIn profile. So please feel free to connect with G and have interaction. And if you want to buy coffee, feel free to do that. If you want to have informational interviews, but please do not forget to write a brief message as to why you're connecting. You could just simply say, G, it was wonderful to listen to you at this seminar today at UCI. and just leave it there. Down the line after a year or two, when you're ready and you need some help, G will remember you because there's a message you left behind, and that's how you build the connection. And with that, please keep in touch and take care of yourself. We are almost there. Vaccines are coming and we are all getting it. We will get out of this very soon. And please take care and stay safe. And G, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Harinder. Thank you, everybody.